Welcome everyone to this webinar. My name is Alan Diving. I'm an associate research fellow with the Upper Great Plains Transportation Institute. And this webinar is to cover the gravel survey that is going to be coming out next week as part of the legislative study of county, tribal, tribal and township road and bridge needs. And a little background on the study. This study is directed by the North Dakota legislature. And the objective of this study is to estimate the road and bridge needs over the next 20 years. And the output from the study, as well as the data collected, is used for a number of different purposes. One of them is the study results is used in the distribution of funding under Operation Prairie Dog. In addition to that, all the data and the results are used as information for policymakers on road conditions and funding needs to maintain the existing road and bridge system. And of course, it is directed by the North Dakota legislature, so it's for use by legislators, but also used for county policymakers and township policymakers as well in making decisions about investment in roads and bridges. Over the course of the study, we do a significant data collection effort, and all of that data is publicly available to all jurisdictions and just the general public as well. Two of the main areas of data that we'll have out there is our traffic counts and then pavement condition data that's collected. And both of those will be presented on the Geographic Roadway Information tool, GRIT, which can be found on the UGPTI website. In addition to that, we do post the survey responses from the counties on our website as well for different policymakers and commissioners and anybody else to look at as well. And this helps provide some good information to policymakers and the public on variations. That's one thing we see depending upon the part of the state, gravel availability, and also competition for gravel use. There could be some pretty significant variations at different parts of the state. We don't publish the township survey results simply because there's 950, 1,000 of those, and that would be pretty unwieldy to scan in and put up online. Before we get started on this, give an overview of our study team. We have a pretty good crew at UGPTI working on this study, including our director, Denver Tolliver, myself, Kelly Bengston, our road and bridge engineer, Tim Horner as well, Dale Hegland, LTAP director, Brad Wentz, ATAC and DOTC director, Sat Paul, who's a researcher with UGPTI, and then Pan Lu working on the bridges as well. So, before we get into the survey itself, let's talk a little bit about the importance of gravel roads to the study. Overall, on a mileage basis, unpaved roads are approximately 92% of the overall mileage we're focusing on here, county, township, and tribal road mileage. And of these roads, they're responsible for about 65% of the total needs. And the table shown in the bottom right here is actually the results from the previous study from 2 years ago. You can see $6.1 billion out of the total $9.3 billion are for gravel roads. And one thing that we know with gravel roads is in comparison to paved, of course, the improvement costs of paved roads is significantly higher, but it's not done on an annual basis like we're doing with looking at paved roads. And just take a look at that paved column. It's relatively consistent over the 20-year period. While paved roads, what the modeling ends up doing here is eliminating a backlog of improvement needs initially. So you can see the cost goes down over time as those improvements are made, where the gravel stays consistent throughout the entire study. A couple of other updates on the data collection process. We've been working on studies similar to this for about a decade now. And over the course of those 10 years, we've made significant improvements, both in terms of the modeling, but also to the data collection itself. So a few updates for this most current study here. The traffic counts themselves, we have a combination of volume and classification counts. And one improvement for this year's study is we've added a lot of additional classification count locations for 2021. We focused on the counties where we didn't have good coverage in the past. So we've added additional so we can separate out truck configurations and so forth from passenger traffic. The pavement data collection, we've made a change to that this year as well. We're collecting data every year now. So we're doing a half of the state each year. Previously, we collected as the study started up. So we'd collect data every 2 years. So the time the study is published, a lot of the data at that point would be 2 years old. And then also enhancements to the survey that we'll be talking about here. We've done this for a few studies now. We've had a steering committee of county road supervisors to provide input on the study and to make suggestions on changes to the survey to reflect updates to practices, but also any other issues that arise in the county road maintenance. For this study, we also had a steering committee of township officers for their input on filling out the township survey. And again, the focus of the survey is always on improvement and maintenance methods, and any changes and updates to what is being done out in the counties and townships, we want it to be reflected in the survey. Here's a quick list of the steering committee. We had good representation for the county survey itself. We had good representation across the state. I didn't list the township members. A number of them, I only had the emails rather than the full names and the townships that they are part of. So rather than list a partial list, we just omitted it from here. So big thank you to the county and township steering committee for their input on the survey and helping us to improve the data collection that we have. A little bit more on the data collection, the timeline. We've done most of the data collection already, and a lot of it's being processed. But a few of the highlights that we've worked on so far, and I'll talk about the bridge methods here in a little bit. There's been a change to it, and we had a group of county road engineers provide input on our potential changes to the modeling. That was done back in April. The traffic data collection occurred over the summer. 420 counts were collected by UGPTI staff, students, and consultants, 350 of which were classification counts. We use these counts in addition to what is collected by the North Dakota DOT. They have a significant count a collection process, and a lot of those occur on intersections near county major collector roads. So there will be a significant amount of counts that are used in the study. Mentioned the pavement data collection. We're doing it on half of the state each year. This summer, 2,600 miles were collected in the southern half of the state. So if you basically draw a line at Highway 200 south, that's what's been collected. And on the gravel survey itself, the steering committee for the counties was held back in June. And then the steering committee responses, we just did it by email for the townships due to scheduling conflicts. That occurred last week. So we made the updates late last week based upon their comments. And of course, the survey webinar is today. The survey itself will go out next Monday. So it should be hitting mailboxes probably Wednesday, Thursday of next week across the state. And then the second mailing of follow-up for non-responses will go out about December 1st. The study itself, we'll go into a little more detail on a couple of these in the next couple of slides. But the travel demand model development, that's ongoing. That'll continue probably until the end of January as additional information comes in, and it's a longer process. So once the traffic counts come in, then we can begin completing that model. The pavement analysis and unpaved and bridge will all occur in the spring. The pavement analysis involves using the AASHTO 93 model to model pavement deterioration based upon the amount of traffic, existing conditions, and so forth, and recommend timing of improvements for pavement to maintain the pavement condition. In addition, we look at widening improvements as well. Due to successive overlays in certain cases, the roads have gotten narrow. So we're looking at improvements to meet the minimum standards in those cases. The unpaved analysis, I'll talk about this a lot more in detail, so we can skip over it a little bit right now. I want to spend a little time on the bridge analysis. There's been a change, and that was what the focus group back in April focused on, was moving towards a bridge needs target to replace the bridge sufficiency rating, because of the data requirements that are the data availability that's out there has changed. And the resulting model will be similar to what's going on with the pavements, based upon existing traffic, bridge condition, and structural information. We'll forecast deterioration and different types of improvements to bridges. So I mentioned a little more, go into a little more detail on the analysis, and here it is. For the travel demand model, it all starts with traffic forecasts, the entire study. So we look at the two major traffic generators on local roads, and that's agricultural production and marketing, and oil related, so oil production and extraction. So we've met with oil and gas, Lynn Helms at Oil and Gas and Justin Kringston for the Pipeline Authority to develop assumptions of oil development over the next 20 years. And then we've also collected data and worked with the National Ag Statistics Service and USDA to help us develop production models moving forward as well. And so using those two major generators, and under the ag, there's a lot of submodels. For example, the ag has 10 individual commodities that are modeled and all the marketing and processing that occurs. In oil, I believe there's 12 individual submodels. So we sum up all of those movements over all of the segments across the state, and then we compare them against all those traffic counts that we collected to see how well the model performs. And in areas where it requires some adjustment, we adjust those based upon the traffic counts. So once we can accurately reflect the existing amount of traffic that's out there, then we can use that information to forecast moving forward. So we have the starting traffic, then all the data we collected on the pavement in terms of condition and so forth, and the gravel we apply models to estimate the costs. So the impacts and the resulting needs to roadways are dependent upon the traffic levels themselves. For paved roads, the heavier the traffic, the faster the pavement will deteriorate, and the design will result in a thicker pavement. And of course, maintenance corresponds to increases as traffic levels increase as well. On unpaved roads, more traffic means more blading and more frequent and thicker gravel overlays. And in certain cases, depending upon the location of the road in proximity to residential areas, or simply the upper end traffic levels, we'll look at drought suppression and base stabilization as well. And then a little more detail on the unpaved analysis. So we have the travel demand model that has traffic levels assigned to all gravel roads across the state once it is complete. Then we assign the maintenance costs to these roads based upon the level of traffic. And the costs are based almost exclusively off the survey we're talking about today. And again, that's a survey of costs for aggregate costs, blading costs, and so on and so forth, and the practices. So how are roads being treated differently based on different traffic levels and by county. Then we group those miles by the traffic levels and then apply an annualized cost to each traffic level, then sum up the mileages across jurisdictions. And so we'll have a county specific estimate of needs, and then a township estimate of needs by county as well. So into the survey itself. The objective of the gravel survey is to first off obtain current component and maintenance costs. So we have I think 8 data points now, so we can see how gravel costs have changed by county across the state. In addition to that, the current maintenance practices. So what are you actually doing out in the counties at different traffic levels? And then there's a number of questions that we have in the survey to help us understand why the numbers are different. So why do we have differences in costs between counties and regions? And as we go through the survey itself, I'll kind of point out those types of questions. And these always a result because it will always have situations in counties where one county's needs will be, we'll say X, whatever that number is. And their neighboring county will be either significantly higher or significantly lower. And so those questions help us understand what is being, the reason for those differences, and to also confirm that they're reporting the same things in the same units and so forth. So onto the survey itself. This first portion of the survey doesn't require much explanation, aside from the fact that there are many cases we'll have questions on how the survey was follow up to ensure that the survey was filled out correctly, but also if there's things that were reported and we have additional questions, then we can figure out who we need to contact back at the county or the township for more information. The next section talks about the aggregate type that is being used on the roads. And this helps us for a number of reasons. It helps us to understand the practices, because depending upon the type of gravel and the type of aggregate and processing practices that are used, may have a variation in the maintenance activities, but also it helps us understand the costs. So if we have a different costs of crush and royalty at the pit, including specs, then we can understand it a little bit. So the first two, whether it's gravel or scoria, and then following that, we have different descriptions of aggregate, whether it's pit run, screen, crushed material, whether it's spec'd, tested, and so forth. And anything else that we're not including on the list, please add in the other or write additional information in the margins. Next, for the placement practices, this also helps us understand something that's later in the survey, which is the placement cost per mile, but also to understand what's actually going on at the county. So different options for placement practices. And I go back up one step for the previous survey. Notice it says check all boxes that apply. So many of the different options could be selected if they're used in your county. Same thing for placement practices. Select all that apply: truck drop and blade, windrow equalize, water roll and compaction. And then when the placement is occurring, reshaping, pulling in shoulders, and soft spot repair, and anything else that's being done at the same time. Again, this helps us understand the placement cost itself, but also differences between counties as well. This section asks the counties to report who's doing the work. And this initially came about as a number of questions. Like I mentioned before, we have two counties with that are neighboring that have different costs. And one county was using almost exclusively county labor, where the next county was using almost exclusively contractor labor. And typically contractor labor would be higher. So for each of the tasks, please enter the percentage of the work that's done by the county staff and percentage that's done by the contractor. So if hauling, for example, is done 50-50 from 50% by the county, 50% by the contractor, and enter 50 in each column. If blading is done 100% by the county, then we'd have 0 in the contractor row. Then this portion of the survey is really where the meat is. This and the next slide will show. And these are all the actual component costs. So in this case, we have a number of different options. You can see in the third column where we have a bunch of check boxes. Check whichever one applies in your county. And I always use the example, when I think of gravel, I always think of gravel overlays in terms of inches. That's how I instantly think of it. But some counties think of it per yards per mile, or per ton. So what you use whichever your county typically reports in, and we can convert it after the fact. So the first one is what's the actual aggregate cost itself. So we're looking for the gravel scoria costs, crushing royalties at the pit. The second one is average trucking costs from the gravel origin. Many counties are reporting that the freight cost is much higher than the actual component cost itself. So we want to get a good handle on what that is as well, so we can arrive at a gravel cost per yard at the road itself, not at the pit. And whether you report that in per loaded mile, per yard, or per ton, and then whichever one is easiest to report. And then also we'll look at the average trucking distance for aggregate. This gives us some additional information on gravel availability within your county. And then finally, the truck payload associated with that in yards or tons to get an idea of the configurations that are being used out there as well. So with those first 4 columns, we can get an idea of what the cost per yard is at the road itself. Then the placement cost is the next one. How much do you estimate for placement costs per mile? And the slide from the section from a few slides ago on the placement techniques helps us to understand that cost. The blading cost, we're looking for the annual cost per mile. And dust suppressant and base stabilization, if they're used, estimated annual cost per mile there as well. And the costs in the previous slide are used in conjunction with this table. Here we ask the counties to report how they are maintaining roads based upon different traffic levels. And we understand there's a lot of variation in traffic levels from county to county. One county's low volume road may be another county's high volume road, depending upon the level of activity that's occurring. So we're asking the county in the first row here under daily traffic to report how they classify roads low, medium, and high in terms of total vehicles per day. And under those 3 different traffic categories, how thick of a gravel overlay, how does the gravel overlay change? So on a low volume road, do you have a lighter overlay than medium and high? Same thing for the third row, which is the blading frequency. As traffic increases, does the blading frequency increase as well as the regraveling frequency? So how many years between regraveling applications? And then the last 2 ask whether the county uses dust suppressant or base stabilization and at which traffic levels. We've seen in many cases where under the low and medium, neither of those are used, but under the high volume roads, they may move to those what we have as intermediate practices to preserve the road condition. And then with the yes and no dust suppression, there's a couple of questions that ask which type. Again, earlier we asked the cost per mile for dust suppression. Then here we can line it up with the type that's used. There's variations in costs of different products, so we want to be able to understand that. Same thing for base stabilization. And a new question for this year that came up is whether the county is using recycled asphalt in their maintenance and improvement practices as well. The last section asks about the condition of the roads. We separate out in two categories for federal aid roads and non-federal aid roads for two reasons. One, because of the funding that is available for the CMC that isn't available for non-CMC, but also the different standards that go along with it. So under each of those categories, if you could report the percentage of roads in very good, fair, and poor condition. And then if available, and your county does spec gravel, please attach a sample spec and a sample gradation or the state materials spec number. And if you use different material on CMC versus non-CMC, if you could provide samples for both of those. And many counties just would either scan it in and email it or just append it to the survey when they mailed it in. Then the last section is an open section. So it's just basically says comments or suggestions about the survey. If there's anything that is being done in your county that we didn't ask about, we'd like to hear about to make sure that our analysis is reflecting the actual practices that are out there. Plus anything else that is occurring in your county that we might not know about. This year, we didn't have a whole lot of flooding problems because it was pretty dry, but that's one that usually continually comes up in different parts of the state. So that's a quick overview of, of the county survey. Now we'll get into the township survey, which is similar to the county survey, but it's an abridged version. We understand that the township officers, it's not their full-time job to work on the roads. So we're looking at the type of information that is readily available to most township officers. And we have two options with reporting the costs. The individual components like we had in the county survey, which asks them the specifics, and I'll show that in the next slide. And also if that isn't readily available, we have a overall cost number that is used. And on the practices side of things, who performs the maintenance? Does the township contract for it? Have the county do the maintenance, or do they have some of their own equipment? And also looking at the blading and regraveling thickness, similar to what we did in the county survey. And the cost, the component costs and the total cost is laid out a little bit differently. You notice that under section 1 there, we have the average gravel scoria cost per yard per ton, the trucking cost per loaded mile per yard, placement costs, blading costs, and dust suppression costs, very similar to the county survey. If this information isn't all readily available, we're just looking for on section 2 under the gray section there, the total cost if the breakdowns are known. So the total cost per yard per ton or the annual cost per mile, whatever is available. Then we've added the section that asks the number of miles that the county maintains to get, so we compare that against what we have in our GIS shapefile to confirm that we're tracking with the actual numbers and improved miles. Then in the townships, when a overlay is applied, what is the thickness, either yards per mile, inches, tons per mile? Then who does the maintenance? And actually I see an error there, blading frequency. It should be who does the maintenance, county maintained, township contracted, or the township staff does the maintenance. Then blading frequency and graveling frequency, blading frequency once a week, once a month, twice a month, or other. And depending upon the part of the state, there's pretty wide variation in how this is reported. And then graveling frequency, whether it's done yearly, every 2 to 3, 3 to 4, or 5 or more, or if it's well past 5 years, a number of townships will have checked the other box and said as funds become available. And then finally, aside from routine maintenance and improvements, what other challenges are facing roadway maintenance in your county? And you know, the county and the township overlap there, but this is the case where we have flooding, high traffic generators, other things along that line. The township survey closes out with a very similar question to the county section. Is there anything else that's going on in your township that we haven't asked about that could help us understand your maintenance practices and issues facing the roadway condition in your township? So we get a wide variety of responses there, and they're all very helpful for us understanding the situation in the townships. So that's a quick overview of the surveys for both the county and the township. So to wrap up, again, the importance of the survey and the results is that unpaved road needs often comprise roughly 2/3 of the total statewide needs. And one of the key inputs to estimating those statewide needs are the survey responses from the county and the township survey. And the survey responses, the reported costs and practices from the surveys are used in conjunction with the travel demand model to estimate the gravel needs over the next 20 years. And finally, the survey is going to be mailed out next Monday with a requested submission date of November 19th. So a 2-week turnaround time. And then December 1st, we'll go through the week of Thanksgiving. We're going to go through to see which response we received and then send out a reminder survey December 1st. If there are any questions or comments about the presentation or the survey in general, my contact information is alan.divig@ndsu.edu, and my phone number is 231-5988. Thank you for your attention to the webinar today. And if, again, any questions, please feel free to reach out to me directly. And I thank you in advance for your participation in this study. Thanks. Have a good day.